Hey there, hope all is well. Back at you today with some more RT News updates. And as you can tell from today's title, Russia and Saudi Arabia to set up $1 billion energy fund. I'm going to be sharing about 3 or 4 articles with you dealing with an historic event, being that the monarch of Saudi Arabia has never visited Russia up until this current point, and some of the ramifications that will have with coming agreements that they will be setting up that are all an attempt to bypass and to begin to shift away from what's considered the petrodollar. And so before I dive into those articles, as always, if you're new to RTD, I want to encourage you to click the subscribe button along with the notification tab to be notified of upcoming interviews as well as news updates. And also, in order to improve your monetary awareness and your monetary IQ, I want to encourage you to visit the RTD University page, where I have put together all my prior interviews from economists, authors, professors, commentators, you name them. They've shared their thoughts on what it means to rethink the dollar and why this is probably one of the most important times where you can begin getting this type of information for yourself, improving your IQ on the subject of the dollar. So, without further ado, let's dive into today's news. All right, so as I mentioned, I have 4 articles I want to share with you, all dealing with this historic event of the Saudi monarch visiting Russia, which has never taken place in history up until this point. And so I want to pose a couple questions to you at the very end to get your take on this situation, but also share with you a viewpoint shared by my most recent guest, Michael Pinto, from Pinto Portfolio Strategies, and how when I posed this question to him, he mentioned how, no nation wants to be left holding unbacked promissory notes when you have our central bank here, the Federal Reserve Bank, who's printing money at an alarming rate, which is depreciating and devaluing the current holdings of all these nations. So more nations will begin doing side deals as well as agreements to kind of spend these things and get the most bang for their buck while they can, because they are aware of something that is occurring or have already occurred, and that will leave those promissory notes of no use to them. So let's dive into today's articles. As always, if you're interested in finding out more, you can scroll below and get those links for yourself, which I encourage you to do, so that you can formulate your own thoughts on these matters. And so let's dive into these articles, and I'll briefly skim through them, and I'll give you a little something to think about and go from there. So very first article here is from RT, and it says, Russia and Saudi Arabia set up a $1 billion energy fund. Got a couple thoughts I want to share with you there. And then the next one here is from Al Arabia English, and it says, King Salman Russia visit has potential to change Middle East landscape. Interesting way of putting it. And then the very next one here is from the Independent UK, and it says, Saudi Arabia's king to make first ever official trip to Russia. And then the very last article here is from Khaleej Times, and it says, Saudi king visit Russia, invest in Russian toll roads. So now we have an investment in the toll roads, as if Russia actually needs investment from other countries in their roads. So we will see. But other than that, I just want to dive in briefly and give you something to think about. So here we have Russia and Saudi Arabia to set up $1 billion energy fund. And so it's a short article that you can read through for yourself, but it kind of gives an outlay of how this event has taken place and some of the details as to the deals that will be taking place. It says, according to Novak, the basic agreement to establish a $1 billion fund has already been reached. And so this is nothing new, but yet it's just officially been announced as an event, as in a story rather, because the king himself, coming from Saudi Arabia rather. It says Novak said Russia is focused on developing cooperation with Saudi Arabia, not only within the OPEC framework, but also outside the cartel, including the energy sector, the energy, electric power sector, and renewable energy resources. And so, one thing that stood out for me with this particular line here is how this Novak, the Russian energy minister, made a comment, and he used the word cartel. And so in his statement there, he said Russia wanted to work with Saudi Arabia outside of the OPEC framework, outside the cartel. So that made me wonder, what cartel is he referring to? Is it the banking cartel from the West, or is it just the monopoly of the OPEC nations in and of themselves, being that all the world's oiled? For the most part, it comes through, and the decisions come through the Middle East when it comes to the pricing of oil. So I wasn't quite sure, but I thought that was very telling of the mindset when he mentions the word cartel. This is a government official mentioning cartel. So anyway, it says the 2 sovereign fund agreed to partnership in 2015 establishing a joint 10 billion platform and inking several investment deals. So it gives us some more details there. But just the idea that, 1 billion has already been scheduled to be invested, and then they have deals for 10 billion. And then we're going to get into some more articles where they're going to talk about the fact that they're going to invest in toll roads and things like that. So, Saudi Arabia, who's apparently strapped for cash, is looking to invest in another country when they themselves just recently tried to launch some government, some bonds for their purposes of raising money because they're in need of funding things for themselves, but they have money to invest in Russia? Not sure. So next one here. It's King Salman's Russia visit has potential to change Middle East. And there's a couple things I highlighted here. And it says King Salman's visit to Moscow demonstrates that Saudi Arabia is trying to balance its relations with the two superpowers, the U.S. and Russia. And so trying to balance its power. So never before until this point in time has Saudi Arabia been so open to cooperate with Russia, being that they've had their historical conflicts dealing with Iran and other things that those nations haven't been able to agree upon. But yet now today, all of a sudden, everything is all fine and well, and they're trying to balance the power between the U.S. and Russia, where Saudi Arabia up until this point has been solely a partner with the U.S. rather because of the agreement between the dollar linked to oil. And so I guess, something has changed or something is changing where Saudi Arabia is looking to establish a strong relationship with a quote unquote enemy to the U.S. in doing business with Russia. So there's more to that story clearly. And then it quotes Shahib al-Mahika. It says, the visit at this critical time indicates that Russia has proven its presence in the Middle East and is giving due importance to Riyadh's political and strategic status in the Russia-Arab relations. So it says this critical time. It's referring to all this tension going on and the fact that this is an historic event because Russia and Saudi Arabia has never really seen eye to eye up until now, and that leads you to wonder why. So give you a little bit more here. It says Putin hosted Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in the Kremlin on May 30th, where both leaders gave the green light to their governments to bolster cooperation in various fields, including oil, renewable energy, and infrastructure projects. It says the visit of the Crown, or the Prince, to Moscow was timely as it came on the heels of U.S. President Donald Trump's visit to Riyadh on May 21st, where he talks with over 30 Arab and Muslim leaders. So right around the time Donald Trump went to Saudi Arabia, the Prince of Saudi Arabia came to Russia to kind of work things out. So it's interesting. I wonder what was the talks like between the king and Donald Trump in regards to these new agreements that will be formed with U.S.'s enemy, or so-called enemy. It says Saudi Arabia and Russia, the world's top oil producers, have worked closely together over the past year to reach an agreement between OPEC and non-OPEC oil producers to cut global output and boost prices. So you have Saudi Arabia and Russia really looking to ramp things up. And then what made it interesting, how this statement here said strategic leverage. It says Russian leaders look forward to gaining strategic leverage in order to enable them to curb any polarization in the Middle East, even though this is difficult to change in the short term, as many Arab countries are pro-West. So Russia has considered this a strategic leverage point for them to actually start forming these deals and these partnerships with OPEC nations, where they have always been dollar friendly because of the linkage of the US dollar to oil, which is, I guess, changing. So more information, if you want to read that, feel free to dive into it for yourself. The next one here says Saudi Arabia's king to make first ever official trip to Russia. So just give you an idea, it says King Salman to visit Russia for the first time, official trip to the country by sitting Saudi monarch. Very first one. It says we are awaiting the king's visit on Thursday, so that would be tomorrow. And it says the Saudi government in turn called the visit between 4th and 7th of October historic. It says King Salman does not do courtesy calls, so it can be reasonably assumed that his first official visit to Russia capital is a serious event. In recent years, the two countries' support for opposite sides of the wars in both Syria and Yemen have added to political tension. So the fact that they've been, having disagreements on two other Middle Eastern countries for the longest, that they're able to, I guess, work around it or try to come to some type of agreement for the sake of all these deals is telling of where this whole economic and monetary environment is heading, when you have two people who never saw eye to eye willing to make amends for the agreement of working together outside of what has been conventional relationships with the U.S. So definitely telling. So more information if you're interested in reading that. Next one, and the very last one here. Says Saudi king to visit Russia to invest in Russian toll roads. So the idea that they're investing in toll roads, be outside of energy, goes to show me that they're looking to spend a little extra money there, either to get rid of some of the treasures they're holding on to, or just to really, rub, Russia the right way and say, hey, we're really going to work with you. So let me put some money into your roads or whatnot. So it says Russia and Saudi Arabia will unveil a large deal in infrastructure sector later this week in Riyadh's investing into toll roads in Russia, including Moscow. Kremlin gentleman investment fund said on Monday. So that's just what I want to highlight there. But the idea that we have two countries that have never really seen eye to eye because of a lot of political tensions amongst themselves are now becoming buddies outside of what has been considered the normal. And so when you have the monarchy making an historic trip to Russia, the question would be, what are they going to be just talking about really? What are some of the true agreements they're going to come up with? And so just to, I guess, speculate, not really, don't really have a clue, but seeing the trend of what's happening with a lot of this de-dollarization, I could imagine that both nations will be looking to spend money on each other in the form of de-dollarizing, where they're going to look to, I guess, deplete some of those reserves that they've been holding on to for the longest, because they're aware of something that most people may not be aware of. And so this is just a sign of the times where our monetary powers that be and the monetary shift is taking place, where the petrodollar system has probably officially ended with all of this happening, or it will be ending officially pretty soon. And then the question would be, amongst all these deals, as they deplete their dollar reserves, what will they be using? Will Saudi Arabia eventually announce that they will be accepting the Russian ruble and vice versa? Or will they begin using some form of metal in the form of gold to kind of back up some of these things some of these deals that they're doing? So those are some things worth thinking about. So the question I want to leave you with is, where is all this heading in your estimation? Why now? What do they see coming, or what are they planning that will, I guess, cause the monetary shift away from the petrodollar system? And then at the end of the day, what will those extra reserves and extra dollars, how will those all impact us as they flow back into this country? So leave your thoughts below. I would love to hear some comments on this video. And also, if you find this informative to help people understand what's going on with the petrodollar, aka the Federal Reserve note, please share this so people can hear this message. Other than that, enjoy your day. Thanks.